different kinds of joys in wood turning. There's that incredible feeling when you take a powerful pass and right at the end of it, you've done it right, you've done well, and you got the form you want. It's like you're loving that bowl and it's giving it back to you. So there's the power cut that removes a quantity of wood, and that's one kind of joy. And then right after that, just like in music, you have the different movements of music. And you have that one that's more concentrated, more fine, and it takes everything you've got. So it's the interplay between the powerful, forceful movement that quickly shapes, and then the subtle, gentle movement that does detail, that refines it. And then there's stopping the piece where you get to look at the wood. So you've done dance, you've done form, and then you expose new beauty. And every pass in a piece of wood exposes new beauty. And that's addictive. There isn't much talk about the dance to me today that's in craft. That's the joy of movement, and that goes back to why I do production turning, because you get that many more chances to do movement, to do the dance. And if you get to repeat the dance, it's like any dancer or any musician, you practice, and then it gets refined, and then there's unhesitation. There's that place where you can be totally absorbed in it. You don't have to think about it, and then a different part of you takes over.
Hello, I'm Dale Stubbs from Chico, California. I've been turning professionally out there about 10 years. More recently, I've been getting involved in workshops and conferences and some teaching. And now I find myself with the privilege of being here at Totten Press's wood shop to do a video on wood turning. So I'm going to specialize it in the turn bowl. So you can see here in front of me, I've got tools laid out. That'll be a good place to start. There's such a myriad of tools on the market nowadays, it's kind of confusing. As well as talking about the lathe and how I took and modified this one. I tend to modify anything I get my hands on. Another important part of turning is the chucks and sticks. Over here we've got some wood, and we'll be talking about taking a green piece of basically firewood and making a bowl out of it. That's a lot of fun to go through. Once you've got a chunk of wood, the next problem is what shape do you make it? So I'm going to talk a little bit about design and subtlety of form and where you can find your own designs. Over here, some bowls I've had fun doing this last week. You can see there's different woods, different styles of turning, different forms. So to make a bowl, I think the first place to start is with the tools. Over here, I've divided these into 4 species of tool. Well, they're all the same thing. They have an edge and they have a handle. Now, the first set I've got here is the flat tools, commonly known as scrapers. Over here is the deep cut tools called bowl gouges, square cut bowl gouges. There's shallow gouges. And over here is the medium cut gouges, usually shaped in the ladyfinger style. Now let's look at these scraping tools. Here's a couple of homemade ones. This is a piece of high-speed steel put into a pipe. This is a piece of high-speed steel brazed onto the end of some steel. Here's a couple that I've modified for manufactured tools. The square nose one was actually a beading and parting tool, and this is a thin parting tool here, made into a round nose. You can modify tools any way you want if you can't find what shapes you want. Now notice the bevel on this one is quite blunt, and the bevel on this round nose here is quite long. So you have a choice of bevels on these. This is about 30 degrees, and this is quite steep, about 80 degrees. This is more of a scraping tool. It's used just with a burr on the end. The main problem that's often said today about scraping tools versus cutting tools is that they tear the wood. The important point is that this is kept very sharp and used delicately as a finishing tool. Okay, these are the deep cut bowl gouges. You can see here this is actually the shallowest. You get even deeper grooves than that. Now you notice on the end there, they're actually square cut across. They're about a 45-degree bevel. And you notice the bevel looks thicker and thinner. That's because the tool is thicker and thinner, not the angle has changed. Now over here I've got an even deeper gouge to show you. This is an especially deep cut bowl gouge. You see how deep the groove is. Again, 45-degree bevel. It's used for finish cutting. And the extra metal here that's gained adds to rigidity in the tool as well. Okay, next door to it here is a tool out of round section. This has got more of a ladyfinger shape to it. What you have actually is a square cut on the end, and it's brought back so you have multiple uses of this gouge. I learned this shape from some turners in the UK. And the last tool I have to show you here is this, still a fairly large gouge. The other one is almost too large for most bolt turning people are doing. You notice the angle on this, instead of being square cut, it's beveled back about 10 degrees in this angle. The slight angle back of 10 degrees gives you a little bit more of a leading point on the edge, makes it easier to penetrate the wood. So this is your basic bowl gouges, deep cut. Here next door for a comparison is some real shallow gouges. And these are normally considered to be spindle gouges, although they can be used on bowls. This is the most common spindle gouge. It's shallow and different roundness on the end. Sometimes they're very rounded, sometimes they're blunt like this. And see this has a fairly long bevel, about 30 degrees, hollow ground. This one here next door is basically the same tool. It's a little thicker section, so I would choose this one for bowls if I had to choose, although they're very similar tools. This little fella here I made out of a piece of square stock. It cost $4 for this piece of high-speed steel. I ground out the tip. It's shallow, but you see the thickness of it makes it a very rigid tool. This works good in production spindle work as well as in delicate bowl work, doing the details. And the last set of tools I have to show you is medium cut. They're not as deep as the bowl gouges, and they're usually done with this shape on the end, the ladyfinger shape. This is the smallest one I have. Basically, they're all the same tool, just a different scale. This is a very large one that I use for architectural work or for large bowls. Now here on the end is kind of a half-breed between the two. You can see this is the same medium cut, but it has an interesting end on it. This has got two bevels. I'm not going to be using two bevels to cut. I'll be using just the one on the end. So what I have is a very short bevel, which increases my fulcrum advantage. And it's a blunt angled gouge, which is a real advantage in some bowl turning. So again, these may look real different, but basically they're all just a handle with an edge on the end, and that's what does the work. Now I'm going to take a tool out of each section and turn a bowl. There's a medium cut ladyfinger. There's a shallow gouge. Here's a deep cut or bowl gouge. And here's a scraper or flat tool. What I'm doing now is roughing the outside of this bowl. Just showing you different tools that you could use. So this doesn't just make dust the way scrapers are supposed to. It definitely makes curls. This is green red oak. That's one of the reasons it's making such nice shavings. Now you get a broader shot here, and I'll show you how you hold the tool. So your safest position is with your handle underneath your arm and your finger on top if you wish. And this is the most powerful grip, more delicate work, is like this. This is often the way I hold the tool. Sometimes your hand is underneath the wrist, sometimes your hand over. Now I'll show you a different tool. This is one of the deep bowl gouges. Now they're made for outboard turning especially. So you angle down if you can, and you see how it'd be hitting the waves or the bed. So I'll hold it up, but by turning different angles, I can get a cut with it. You notice I'm going from the smallest diameter of the piece out to the largest. This tool rolls. You notice one thing about this tool, and this has to do with all gouges, the bevel has to be rubbing almost at all times in its cut. Take the shavings off there. We're at the heel, bring the edge in, and then push the gouge forward. Now if I bring the heel out and that point hits, it can grab the tool. So my pivot point is like this, and the edge, it's like a fulcrum point. This is my control, is that little point there. And that's the secret of having a gouge not grab. Now I'll show you a little bit about hand turning so you can see the process easier. It's not spinning, but the motor's on. That's because I have a clutch, a foot clutch. I'll show you that later.
But this is the most important thing I can show you about wood turning. Come on in close and I'll show you what's happening. And by hand, you can see the process. It gets slowed down. Here's the bevel rubbing. Now I bring the edge into contact, and I'll start to cut shavings, see? I'm getting up toward that point. If I let it go in, it'll grab very solidly, okay? You can also use the bottom side of the tool. Here's the bevel rubbing. I bring the bevel into contact, I'll cut. If I bring the bevel out of contact, it'll grab. It's that simple. Now I can turn the tool over, get more of a slicing motion by doing that. Because this is a heavy tool, it can hang way off the tool rest. Now I'll refer back for just a second to that square nose I was just using and show you that. You see how far it's hanging over the tool rest here? So if I'm going to make the same cut with this tool, I'll bring the rest in. That way my fulcrum is much better. Now this tool is used, again, takes a nice shaving. Here you can see them. Going to side grain. Going in this direction is to side grain. It's a very good tool for taking off out of roundness in the wood. It's this way. I'll show you in the larger movement what you don't do with these tools. You never come back and face the bowl this way, square onto the bowl. It would get thrown down into the wood, all right, and you'd be cutting in grain, hitting square onto here, where if you come from here, you're cutting side grain. You're cutting the grain sideways and shears off much easier. So gouge starts from here and work over. The square nose goes in this fashion, or if I had a round nose, it could be worked like this, the same cut. This tool is never used like this either, because it would be grabbed and sucked into the wood. Now I'll pick up the third gouge that I was showing you. Now the 4 tools. This is the shallow gouge. It doesn't work as good as a deep gouge. It's a little grabbier, but it'll still make a good shaving. And see, this is a whole different movement than the square nose or deep cut bowl gouge uses. You can take a very deep cut, or you can take a very shallow cut. I showed you this, even though it's a spindle gouge, because it can be used. It just takes more care. I'll compare it to the square gouge. See, this tool cuts on the side, and this tool cuts on the front. But you see, if I put them together, they're lined up and they're doing the same thing, but the tools are angled differently. This one moves in a pushing motion. This one, the edge is pulled along. What that does is it puts the handles in a different place more than the edge. Now, on this type of turning inboard, this runs into the ways of the bed. So this tool here, the one I've been using, is better for inboard turning in that sense. And here I am cutting on the side of the tool. I'll pick up the 4th tool, the medium deep, but the ladyfinger gouge that I was showing you. This one is less grabby because it's a deeper cut. It moves in very much the same motion as the other one. I'll get these tools out of my way, okay? Okay. You see how I put the tool in next to my body? That makes it more solid. Right here. So this one happens to be my personal favorite tool. Everybody has their own. I don't know if I mentioned it to you. I'm doing this bowl upside down. Actually, this is the foot of the bowl I'm shaping now, and the rim up here. It's easy to get to this way, especially working from rough wood. I'm just going to go ahead and turn a foot on it that Could be later chucked into a collet chuck, a glue block, a multiple or single screw face plate. Now this is a pushing cut. The point of the edge is being pushed along by the handle. I'll come back over here and show you the opposite. This gouge does both. The edge is being pulled along. As I move it over, I arc it down, I come into a pushing cut. A pushing cut is grabbier and more powerful. A pulling cut is more delicate, but it doesn't grip into the wood as hard. I'm going to show you hand turning, be sure you've got that idea. There's a bevel rubbing, bring the edge into contact, you just give it permission to cut. Now I can roll this tool and work on another part of it, you see that? Now if I bring the tool out, I take a wider shaving. If I make the edge more vertical, a thinner shaving. Just that simple. I'll take one more little cut with it, and level the foot and be done with this bowl. Bevel rubbing is not as critical when the edge is being pulled along as when it's being pushed along. Now it's a pushing cut, you see that? And that's the basics of bowl gouges on the outside. Right now this is a bowl gouge. A week ago it was a spindle gouge. It's that little square tool. It can level this surface, just like this. And I told you I'd do this bowl with these 4 tools, but there's a square tool, a square edge tool that's much better than this. Here's a flat tool, bigger for surfacing. But what really has happened, look at the handles, is that I moved the handle. It's going to do exactly the same cut. You'll do a much easier, better job of it. Okay. Well, that's some basic bowl cuts for the outside of a bowl. Now I'll grab another piece and show you some more things. Here's another piece of green or fresh red oak from the same log. I drilled the hole so it'll be mounted, which means that the sapwood will be on the top of the bowl, and this will be at the bottom. It's a common mistake in roughing out a piece, and even myself after years to do it, to look at a piece and put your pretty wood, and that ends up being the top of the bowl. That's what's going to be cut out. So this is mounted so that it'll be cut out, the sapwood will be cut away, be just left on the rim. Then the heartwood, the prettiest wood, will be in the bottom of the bowl. You can see this has fairly flat growth rings. This is from a very large log. It was a butt cut from what was left over from a sawmill, again using scrap wood. On this piece of mulberry here, you can see I've cut out a bowl already. And here's the bark, here's the sapwood, and here's the heartwood, the prettiest wood. So if it was cut as this bowl is, the chunk would be cut out like this and mounted here first, and down here would be the foot of the bowl. I'll show you some bowls over here that demonstrate that. Well, here's one of the oak bowls I turned last week out of a similar piece of wood, although it was a different log. It has a shorter circle to the size of the log, so it was a smaller log. But I left it with the bark edge on, although not actually the bark still on the bowl. It was coming off. It would have hit me in the face if I left it on. You can see here was where a limb was coming into the log, and I left it on the outside, and that also gives this pattern to it. Now, I'll be showing about cutting things with this sort of a lip to it. It's a little more difficult, but it's not a hard thing to learn. And this has the sapwood on the outside, on the top of the bowl, as you can see. Here's another one that does. Has a very regular pattern in the center here. That's because, see, the growth ring patterns are very flat. Then it was a very large log. Here's the heart of the log here, and here's the sapwood. As you see, I haven't sanded it yet. It's right off the tool. It's still rough here. If I'd have inverted it the other way, I'd have had the sapwood on the bottom. And that's okay, but in this piece of wood, the sapwood's starting to deteriorate slightly. It's discoloring. I didn't want that in the bottom of the bowl. I wanted the most sound and the prettiest wood in the bottom. Here's another example. This is mulberry, like the chunk of wood I was showing you over there. It still has the bark on.
And here's a couple of exceptions over here to this rule about sapwood and heartwood. It's not really a rule. This is a walnut bowl. You can see it has a whole different type of pattern to it. And that's because it was cut in the reverse. The sapwood was put in the bottom of the bowl. This might help showing this piece with bark on it here. This is a piece of mulberry out of a small log, limb. See, here's the curve of the sapwood on the walnut bowl, and just like it'd be here. So this would be the bottom of the mulberry bowl. But you can see I've cut the sapwood away from the bottom here. So I still have heartwood in the bottom of the bowl. And that's why it has this wide rim. I didn't have to throw away all this wood to this width here. I got to get a bigger piece out of it. But mostly I have heartwood in the bowl, in the center that you see. But you get some interesting patterns that way. I kind of get a kick out of this one. It's a shape I've never done before. I'm always playing with different styles of form. One Fred said it looks like an old army hat. It's a real utility shape. It's something you wouldn't be afraid to put in the dishwater. So I think that's important too. There's another one over here I get a kick out of. Not quite as utility as that one. This is apple, turned yesterday, and look what happened to it. Used to be flat. I think we can flatten her out here. It's the same grain configuration as that one. The sapwood is on the bottom. Maybe I can flatten it out here and show you. See the heart and the curve here? So we cut away some of the sapwood, so you should have heart in the bottom. Then on the inside of the piece, you get this interesting pattern with just a little bit of sapwood coming through here. Well, I'm getting a kick out of doing these thin turnings. But now it's time to turn some wood. Show some other tools. Here's the 3/8 hole that goes onto this screw chuck. I'll show you that now. This actually was a hand-cut thread out of a hardened bolt. I wanted it to last for a while, so that's why I used a hardened bolt. These washers come in different sizes. This one, 1/2 inch, means that when it's over here, a 1/2 inch of the bolt sticks out. That's the distance. So I have different thicknesses of them. This is a regular standard faceplate. This nut goes on the threads that are on the other end of the bolt, and of course the threads go on inside the faceplate. Now the threads I cut here, you notice they're fairly sharp. They're vertical, and they bite into the wood better without breaking the fibers. I'll take that off and show you the rest of it. So there's the bolt on the inside. It's just that simple. Tightened down very tightly. I didn't mention I have a little washer here. This keeps it from breaking out. Now out here on the rim you can just barely see a hint. Since this is aluminum, I cut away a little bit of the surface in here so that it contacts on the outside when these two mate together. Now in here you can see I've got a washer. It's just a hardware store washer. It's not what I'd recommend. But since this faceplate isn't made for this lathe, it was a little short, and I had to use something. It's not quite precision. It gave me a little bit of a seating problem, but I'll get by with it. This is the way it goes on. Real tight. If I have a slipping problem, I just put a little water in there. It acts just like glue. Over here, some more chucks. I'll introduce to you. The most common kind of faceplate is the multiple screw. You don't really need large ones for most work. This is a fine size. This thicker one is better. This is the one I brought from home, and this is stronger. Again, they screw onto the spindle. If you can get a power screwdriver to set your screws, it makes it a lot faster. And that's one reason I use the single screw faceplate. Not with this one is easy, but it would work. Especially with this metal here, you could put a lag bolt up through a piece of wood, clamp it on, and have a single screw. Not quite as strong as the one I made. This is one of the newest chucks on the market. I believe it's called a precision chuck. I don't have all the other gizmos that go with it. But you turn a tenon on a piece, it closes down. It's real strong. Good chuck. Another similar chuck, I think they call it the spigot chuck, for smaller work. Here's an insert that goes in it. And again, it has the thread on the back that goes into your lathe. Little weak here. You can't do real heavy work with it. It's for more delicate things, but I like it because it's fast. This is the expanding chuck. This one is called the 6-in-1. It's been around for a while.
I turned my own aluminum center here so I'd have it real precision. But you cut a dovetail insert into your wood, and this goes and expands into it and grips. This other one is a remarkably simple design. It's just a solid piece of steel called a pin chuck. The flat in here with a pin, which happens to be a nail, is what does the action. You drill a hole close to this size. When it goes in and turns, as you can see here, this nail crams against one side, and that locks it. You turn the bowl back and it's unlocked. This is particularly useful for bowls where it's difficult to get a flat spot to put a normal faceplate into. And the last one here isn't a chuck at all. It's a type of glue, super glue, gap filling. I've just been introduced to it. This is cyanoacrylate glue. There's probably different brands that do the same job, but the magic of this is not so much super glue for myself that I need it to be instant, but it adheres to wet wood. I've had some failures with it, so I wouldn't guarantee it. Play with it and learn about it. Still, that single screw faceplate that I mounted this bowl with is one of my favorites. I'll demonstrate something here that I think is important. This is the tailstock with a ball bearing center, and I'm bringing it up to lock the bowl in. That can be used either on a lightweight lathe to make everything real solid so there's no play, or in a production situation with a heavy tool, it just makes cuts go faster. Just want to make sure everybody knows that it's okay to use a tailstock. As I turn the motor on, remember I mentioned to you about the clutch, and that allows you to do hand turning. Why don't you come around here and I'll show you what I was talking about. Well, you can see the first part of the clutch system here. This is a piece of plywood that's hinged on the other side, and a turnbuckle fastened in here for fine adjustment of it. If you look here, when I step down and release, I can have my foot underneath it, and that way I don't have to be off balance out here. So this goes up to the cable up here, this exotic piece of hardware. That's a little turn pulley I made with a lag bolt going in for the bearing for it. That comes on over here into the motor housing. And here's what it's all about. Just this very simple high-tech action here. As you can see here, it comes around a little pulley, just ties into the motor base, which is a nice cast iron solid. And then underneath there it's hinged. And it's easy to get a hinge on any motor. It's pretty common to find them that way. Now behind the belt there is a little dowel. It doesn't have to be a dowel, but it needs to be something that's adjustable fairly close to the back of the belt. I'll turn it on here and show you why. See how the belt touches it back there? Well, the force of the motor is going this way. It's throwing that belt back. And if something doesn't push it out this way, it'll just suck this over, and it'll continue to grip on the belt, and you won't have a clutch action. The variable speed, I've never had one to work on myself before as a full-time kind of thing. I think it's an excellent addition to a lathe. It doesn't go clear down to zero, and that's the advantage of the foot clutch. It's a good tool, good addition. Well, you can see over here some more modifications I made to this lathe. I'll have to admit I'm a born tinkerer and always will be one. Now right here, this looks like a sheet of plywood added in. What's actually behind there is pretty solid. It's about 300 pounds of sand. It was all we could cram into this compartment that it contains. What 300 pounds of sand does is several things. It dampens vibration. Obviously, vibration goes into sand. It's not going to come back out like it will with sheet metal. It also crushes a lathe down on the floor and makes it more solid. And that's a real important part in the lathe. It still wasn't quite enough, adding this much weight and solidness to the lathe. So we added a little bit of width out here because most of the vibration is in this direction with the lathe, back and forth. And back over here, plywood out this way and a little longer on the back side, another foot here. You don't want too much here in your way. That's right where your foot's going to go. The whole point of all this about changing the lathe, adding weight to it, making it solid, bolting it down to the floor, the wood turner stands there all day long. And you need this thing pressed down to the floor. You need it solid, compact, vibration dampened out of it. Unless you're working with perfectly balanced wood, you have the sway back and forth to the lathe. That needs to be damped out and held down.
Stephen Hogman, another wood turner, took and put posts up to the roof and crushed the lathe into the floor for doing real big turning. It's this whole principle that needs to be solid. Now, for my type of turning, a clutch is particularly useful, so I'll talk about that, but it's not necessary. As you can see, the piece doesn't start when I turn the motor on. So that's a real important safety factor, and maybe the most important part of the lathe. You don't want any one time for that to start accidentally, especially if, right here, it had been under power. Something's got to give. A strip out, the belt's going to squall, something's going to break. Anyway, it's a good safety factor for that purpose. It's also a safety factor in that if ever my hands can't easily get to the switch, my foot's right there next to the clutch all the time, and I can take away power. The piece still spins a little bit, but it's not held to the motor's power. Another advantage is in whether it's refined wood turning, where I want to be constantly checking my work and seeing how it's coming along, or in productive speed turning, where I'm doing lots of pieces and constantly stopping the lathe. In order to stop it, I don't have to stop the whole motor, especially with a big motor. That's a lot of weight to stop. All I have to do is stop the piece and the headstock itself. And so what happens is I tend to check the work a lot more, and I would hope that that would improve the quality of work, being able to check it easily. It's just that fast. Not only can I stop it fast, but with something in the middle, by slipping the belt, I can get any speed I want, from 0 up to the full speed of the lathe. And anything in between. And that allows me to do either hand turning, very slow speed turning, or in the process of a piece, often I want the speed to change between one part of a cut and another part of a cut, like from a small to a large diameter, from a heavy to a skinnier, more vibrating part, like in a spindle, without having to move any motions in my hand. My hands can keep working, and my foot does all the speed change. Using my foot is something I no longer think about. That's become second nature a long time ago. It just seems to automatically know what I want the speed to be, and it gets there. I don't think it took too long for that to get that way. Well, the last advantage that I see to this clutch business is in finishing. If you put finish on a piece that's spinning, you're obviously going to get sprayed, your shop's going to get sprayed. Or if you put it on a still piece and turn it on and it suddenly at speed, same thing will happen. So here's another advantage. If you can rub it on and then slowly let the piece turn until it builds up to speed, then you can pick up your polishing rag and again, covering it, keep it from spraying. So that's the last advantage. So let's turn some wood. You see the tool's bouncing a little bit because it's hanging out so far. That indicates that you got to move your tool rest. Always keep it as close as you can. A little short one in here would be helpful if I had a weak tool rest base. But this is all right. Just like this. Bevel rubbing isn't so critical in this cut. It's when I come around in this motion that I have to be certain I'm rubbing the bevel. Some back part of the lathe, or the lathe tool. It's a rolling motion and twisting. You turn the tool as you roll it over. As you can see, I'm going to start running into that tailstock. And since I'm not overworking the heaviness of this lathe, I'll take it away. But I just wanted to make the statement that it's okay to use one. Remember this one? Now this one works on a pull or a push cut. Like this, a push cut. Or like this is a pulling cut. I call it a ladyfinger gouge, even though before I
grouped it in the deep bowl gouges because it's actually both. Ladyfinger merely running round nose on the end. It's a real all-around gouge for doing the insides of bowls, particularly useful. I haven't showed you any scraper cuts yet, so I'll show you that now. This is one that's fresh out of the package. I just put a new bevel on it, and this is right off the grindstone. I haven't even taken the paint off the end yet, but it should make some good shavings. You point it down a little bit. There's not a thing wrong with a scraper as long as it's sharp and it's used properly. And this doesn't have to do any fancy motions, it's just flat. I'm real strong on the idea that there's nothing wrong with scraping wood if it's done right, if it's done carefully and you understand the tool. But you can then start getting more efficient cuts by tilting it up like a gouge. See how the shavings are a little bit longer. Here's the cut you never do, is like this. It would pull it down into the wood. This is the way it's tilted or down. Always the edge is pointed down to the wood. You can roll it like this.
Now I've got a surprise to show you, a real exotic tool that I've had for a few years. This is my first gouge. I'll let you guess what the material is I made it out of. But you can see out of the little book that I had when I started learning turning, I got the bevel about right, I guess. Again, steel is still harder than wood. Here's my first wood turning tool on the end, that's the handle. Well, I guess if I use it, it'll make a little bit of point.
I'll start making the foot for the bottom of my bowl now. Oh, I got a little dull spot in it there. Can't imagine why. There's one design consideration, as you can see, I hadn't figured into this tool. Anyway, enough for that.
One of my favorite tools is this ladyfinger gouge called the Stockdale gouge. I've made my own handle for it. Everybody has their own designs. I'll finish this bowl up now.
For some reason, that seems to work better.
Well, now I get a different chucking method on here than maybe you're used to. I'm going to drill a hole in the bottom of this bowl. If you don't have a Jacob's chuck for your tail or headstock, I recommend getting one. They're sure handy. What I'm going to do is drill a hole the same size as is in the other end of the bowl. You want to be sure that your tailstock lines up so the drill's right on center. This one I happen to know is already. And I can look right here on the gauge that you can't see and measure the 1/2 inch. I'm going to change to a little different washer for this bowl. Here it is. Put a little bit of water on the surfaces, makes them stick better. Just like magic. And it goes right on.
You don't always have to chuck up the top first, but it's a way to work with rough wood. This is one cut you can use this tool with. I'll come over and show you another way to use it. That's a pulling cut. I'm pulling the edge along. Again, if it grabs, it'll be thrown out of the wood. Now a pushing cut. Start with the edge, be sure it's in the wood, then you push. And doing normal bowl turning, you're always going from the largest to the smallest diameter on the inside. Now I can start, and I can use the top part of the tool by getting penetrated in there, and then I raise up the handle and cut that way. Start again horizontal, get that edge in there, get a double rubbing, and then roll the tool over. Okay. Just like this. 1, 2. But you're a little better if you get it next to your body and get it solider. I can also use the other side of the tool. Start like this, get it in there. And then see, I'm hitting the tool rest, so I'll wait until I get on the other side. Then I can raise it up. The key to this cut, again, is that most of my concentration is on the bevel. I'm not worried about the edge that much. It'll take care of itself. I can come down to the center. I can come across to the center, like this. Or I can come in and come up to the center. I'll show you another gouge here. This is that deep cut bowl gouge. It doesn't have a problem of running into the waves of the bed when it's doing the inside of a bowl. But again, the heel back here, the bevel, is rubbing against the wood, and when you're learning, put it in first, bring the edge into contact, and then it will cut just fine. Just like that. You can roll it over and use the bottom, roll it over and use the top. Just watch out for that little corner in there. You can come down to the center, or you can come across to the center. Again, your concentration is on the bevel. I'll show you a scraping tool. This is that little round nose, remember? Pointing down a little bit. Now it may shatter a little bit because it takes so much more energy. As you take it gently, you can take a cut. It's that simple. You just work toward the center. When you want to make a finish cut, put a brand new burr on there, then take very light cuts. Extremely light cuts so only burr penetrates. Now another scraping tool. That one had a real short or burr angle. This is the one with a longer angle. This is a commercial bowl turning tool. It makes quite a shaving. It takes a lot of energy. This tool is normally ground with about a 45-degree bevel and not honed by too many people that use this sort of tool. I can show you a shallow gouge. Again, like on the outside of a bowl, it's not the best tool to use. It just can be used. Come over and get your bevel rubbing until that edge penetrates and go in. Thing you want to watch out for, a lot of these shallow gouges or spindle gouges aren't made out of steel that can handle heat. They're out of high carbon steel. And you might burn them because of the radius of a bowl can get quite hot. That's not true in green turning, just in dry turning. What I never do is let it come over and grab on the corner. Can you see that? And one thing that helps in having gouges do bowls, remember this little guy with that short bevel on the end? Actually, it's a double bevel. That just makes for a shorter pivot point. It doesn't have to be as blunt edge as that or blunt in its curve, but it works good. This goes down in and scoops out a hollow in a bowl well where it's deep. So I'll finish up the bowl with this one. It'll be used sideways. It's not as sharp a bevel, so it won't get quite as clean a cut or quite as rapid a removal or shaving. So a little more energy is required. It's a versatile tool. Again, you don't need to buy one made like this. You just buy basically a gouge, but not a shallow one, and grind your own shapes to them. Okay, here it's doing the side cut, the bottom cut, and then it can do it as one full cut. Start with your bevel rubbing. Now you can lower the handle and get that edge up high, come down toward the center. I'm going to speed up the lathe a little bit here. There's a roughed out bowl. Oh, I got it grabbed because I didn't have the handle far enough in this direction. That's an important secret, or help. If you have a gouge kicking on you, pull the handle towards you, like this, until it stops kicking, and then you can penetrate with it. And that may mean that the bevel is not lined up in the direction you want it to go, but first you establish a shoulder for the bevel, then you move the bevel in the direction you want it to go.
That's as far as I'll be taking this bowl. This is what's the process called roughing out, where it's one of the easiest things you can do. You take it to a thickness about like this for this size, coat the end grain, maybe put it into a paper bag and let it dry. It'll warp, get smaller in this direction, then it can be returned again and it won't warp at all. Now I've left the bottom a little thicker just so I could get this shape out of it. Some woods you can't do that with, and it means that I'll have to get a little thicker end grain coating on to be sure it can't crack. This is the first bowl I've turned for you inside and out, but actually I've been here for a week turning bowls. We videotaped some of them. Parts of that material contain ideas and techniques that are similar to what I've been showing you already, but from a different perspective. And parts of it are new ideas and techniques you haven't seen already that I think will be of value to you. So take a look.
Whoop! Okay, that happened because I came out and I wasn't careful to start the edge with the bevel back toward it. It just touched and that's what will happen. So you always start very carefully, place the tool, it's 1, 2, is the tool ready to cut, then you push. And right there it touched, I wasn't ready, and it pulled. You start with a point, bring it over. This is the way that a square nose bowl gouge works as well. You start with the handle towards you, and that's a general rule I use a lot in turning and teaching, is if the tool skates, then one of the first things you do is you bring the handle in the direction that the tool skated until it stops skating. So if I put it like this and it keeps pulling over, then I bring the handle in this direction until it stops. That's where I start the cut, like that. And then when I have a shoulder established, I bring the bevel around, line it up with the cut, and then go. I'm going to show you a finishing cut. Okay, this is what I call a right-hand skew scraper, skew meaning with an angle. Now, I've changed it again since the way it came in the box. I've made a longer bevel that came like this, and again, it's your tool. You can shape it any way you want to. I've also put a longer bevel on it. This gives me the choice of being a scraping tool or a cutting tool. Used as a scraper like this, it's going to be rough on the edge. If I start like this, which is starting safe, and bring it up, there it is. Now here's scraping mode. We're not accomplishing much because it doesn't have a burr. And here's shear scraping mode. This is the way you learn. If you let the handle come down, it'll bite in and pull it along. So that means you never do this. You always keep the handle up, or horizontal, but never low. See, this can go at real slow speed, just like the one on the outside did. You come up towards center. And here, let me show it to you. See, it's an irregular curve, or a French curve. Now it starts very flat, and then it becomes a sharper and sharper radius until it flattens again at the top for doing the bottom of the bowl. This is for long sides, for down in the corner, and then the bottom. But you have because of the French curve, you can match any curve with it.
It's not used just as a scraper flat. You can do it that way also, but I get a better cut if I tilt it up, get a shear scraping action. You hold the tool itself, the handle and all, at about a 45-degree angle. That makes curls this way. Now these I can take either straight from the grindstone, these tools, or I can put a honed edge on them. They have about a 45-degree bevel, or a little shorter on the bottom. This is a technique I sort of learned from Bob Stocksdale, although it's a different way of doing it. I pick up little pieces from everybody in this turning. Sure recommend you going to wood turning conferences or learn any way you can. You pick up techniques from everybody. Okay, this is a wood dowel that I put in here. Instead of having they have machined different inserts that go in. You make your own. I put the wood dowel into a chuck, little Jacob's chuck, or you could grip it anyway. Turn it down to the very slight taper until it fits in here. And then it goes into the hole where the screw was, presses tightly into the wood. Holds it on there. Now this system works with bowls that have a flat, strong top. For bowls that have a very delicate top, I'd put a plug inside that would press against it. That's just about it.
Sharpening's a real important part of wood turning, whether you're learning, beginning, intermediate, or being a professional about it. I'm going to spend some time talking about this subject. I'll start with a grinder. That's how tools are shaped or sharpened. I borrowed this from a friend. It's a half horsepower, 3450, I think it is, RPM. Way too fast for most of the kind of sharpening that we need. First edition I made was the white stone. They might seem a little costly at first, but they last so long and they cut so much cleaner and cooler on the tools that it's really worth any cost as far as I'm concerned. As far as height of a grinder, I've seen people that hold them up very high here, so when they're working on a tool with shield in front of their face, they can see right where they're working. The one I have at home is an old antique. It sits about this high, and it goes so slow because I have an old motor and I've geared it down to about 700 RPM. I don't even need shields on it for protection. And that way I can get over it and see down the bevel of the tool. So there's different approaches. The slow speed is important to me. This is a wheel dresser called a star wheel. It's got these little metal wheels that spin around in it. I consider this real important in a shop. It's often neglected. Dressing wheels is a real important part of sharpening, and they're quite inexpensive. This is another type. It's a carbide matrix, and it's moved along the stone. It cuts a stone very fine and smooth, where the other one tends to rough it up more. Some turning tools are a lot easier to sharpen than others, so I'll start with what I think is the first level to learn on. So I'll start with the one that I think is the easiest to learn. It's a scraper. It's out of flat stock. It has a flat surface that you sharpen, whether it's the side or the end or an angle, doesn't matter. And it has a blunt angle for leaving a burr on the edge. And it's used flat on the tool rest of your grinder. You hold it down and you adjust this angle to what you want the bevel to be. And it's moved in just simply a straight line motion. That's the simplest tool to sharpen. The next level is a flat tool again, but with some kind of a curve. Now, probably the most common would be a bull nose or a round nose. This happens to be a half round tool I use for insides of bowls. On this one, I put a steeper angle, about a 45-degree bevel, and this gives me the alternative of going with a honed edge or a ground edge. Now for this, I use my fingers on the rest, and that's a little more difficult to do, but it gives you much more sensitivity, and this is the motion. Now the whole handle has to go in an arc, like this. And not too much faster than that at all, often slower than that. The next tool I'd recommend is square cut gouge. Here you can see the cross section of it. And a side view here. See, it's cut square across with about a 45-degree bevel. Now the motion on that one, instead of being an arc motion, and your body moves easily in arcs, more easily than straight lines, is a twisting motion. So I suggest when you start a tool like this that you put your hand in both positions to be sure that it's comfortable to start and end your cut. And then you simply roll it across the tool. And some people use the tool rest for this, only for square-ended tools. Now the next tool that combines both of these motions, and that's why I leave it for last when you're learning, is the ladyfinger gouge. It has a similar cross-section to the square-nose bowl gouge, but it's different in that it's rounded on the end instead of being square cut. So this compounds the movement that you need to make in sharpening. And this one happens to have a little longer bevel. I use this for architectural work as well. So I'll show you on the grindstone how I sharpen this. Here's the first movement. It's the rotating movement, very simple, like you use in the deep cut bowl gouge. And it combines with the other movement where you make an arc motion. And you get your whole body and your arm involved in it. It's like this. So this tool combines, as you see, I'm rolling the tool now as well as moving in an arc motion, keeping the edge square to the stone where it hits the tool. That's not necessarily the way to do it. I'll show you another way. Some people find this easier, but to get down to where the edge is lower than the point, you have to push the tool up. So you can start on center and push up toward it. Start on center, push up toward, or you can combine the two motions. So I'll turn it on and show you how I'd sharpen this tool. First I'll dress it. This is the dressing stick. It'll leave the stone very fine. And this is the star wheel, which would rough it up. Now that tool's already shaped, so I don't want to go roughing up the stone for rough cutting, but this is how it's used. Normally it's laid flat and run across. But sometimes these get worn out and get flopping around in there, so I found that it helps when you're using it to tilt it a little bit to the side. The thing you want to be certain of is that these dogs here never go over the tool rest and get crammed down into the tool. I had to do nasty things. So for what I'm doing now, I'll be using this dressing stick because it leaves a fine edge for fine cutting. I think it's real important to get the attitude that the stone has to be very sharp and clean. And instead of taking off a lot, I take a very fine pass a lot of times, every 5 or 10 minutes of grinding. I've always got a sharp stone that way. Put my fingers on here. I'm careful that they're not close to the grindstone. And probably on this one I'll try two fingers. One thing that you always do is you hit the heel first, bring it down toward the edge, and then you see I push up a little bit. Now this is just going in a straight motion. Now I'll show you in an arc motion. Some people find one easier than the other, so I'd try both. Heel first, then a rubbing, and rotate the tool. It's just that simple. See how my whole body's moving? You don't have to do that, but it works good for me. You might try it. Something I commonly do to be sure I'm on the bevel, and especially when you're learning, is I come down here. And I don't sight at the edge, I sight right along the edge so I can see behind the bevel of the tool. I can see exactly what's contacting and what is not. Heel first, edge is made, you can hear the difference perhaps. You have much more steel in contact. You see the speed that I'm working at? That's about all you need. You just 1 or 2 passes at this speed and then you're done. You get to be a master at sharpening, you can take very fast passes. It doesn't necessarily speed up the sharpening process. Take a breath if you need and let it settle down, just like they tell you if you're taking a photograph. I'm using very little pressure.
Actually, the stone, the action of the stone is to come down at the tool. So if my attention is pushing in toward the stone, I'm not resisting that action. I need to be pushing most of my effort up rather than toward the bevel. And the other thing I pay a lot of attention to is that I'm not trying to grind this edge up here at the top. I'm grinding the entire bevel and pushing an entire bevel back. It's a common mistake to make however many years you've been a craftsman. You just want to get that edge ground. That's all you care about. But if that's your attention, what happens is you keep bringing the angle up and it gets blunter and blunter because that's where you're grinding. That's compounded because the action of the stone is to kick the tool down and up. So again, most of my thought is that I'm bringing the bevel back parallel and I'm pushing up against that pressure. Using very little pressure. You see how close my fingers are. When first learning, you can have a finger up in here or very close. And it should never get uncomfortable for your hand. It should never get that hot. 2. I guess my attitude is it's better to take 1 or 2 passes and do it right and take 3 or 4 real fast ones and have a lot of little facets on your edge. Well, it looks done now. This is the most complex tool to grind again. It combines the rolling motion and the arc motion into one motion, that is a rolling arc motion. You won't get this the first time you try it if you've never ground this kind of tool. It's well worth the effort. Just give it time and be patient. This tool is ready to turn now, but for some kinds of turning, I like to have the extra refined edge that a hone brings. So I'll show you that now. The stone that I use here for honing is a fine India stone. I don't use shampoo on it here. It's water and detergent. Instead of oil. Oil will get on your fingers and on your wood, or even kerosene. This is easier. Usually I keep this right next to the lathe, and that way I can get to it very quickly. Less than 30 seconds I can hone and get back to work. Not all turners hone their tools. That's a little different style. I use both. But when I do hone, I want it to be very quick. Turners certainly hone more than carvers do because they're removing so much more material. This has a little hollow in it that's developed over the years. Yeah, it makes it a little easier. The water stays right there and doesn't run off. Now what you can't see is that there's 2 separate points that are touching. I'll show you this on the board up here. What it represents here is this line is a stone. And here would be the top of your tool. And here's the hollow that's made by the grindstone. The important thing is to keep pressure down against here. The thing that's so easy to do is to put all your attention out here, whether it's grinding, honing, or turning, on the cutting edge, the point, and to forget about this one, what ends up raising up. I'll do it more exaggerated here. It's lifted off the stone. Well, what happens is, parallel to this, would be the bevel that it would make on your tool. Well, that causes a lot of problems, both in honing later and in your turning. Now, in most cutting tools, like with a gouge, you need to contact the heel. That's your pivot point. Well, when these two touch, you'd be nowhere near having your edge touching the wood. In order to make the tool cut then, you'd have to come off the wood to have the point touch out here, which means that you lose your pivot point, you lose control of your tool, and it will be jumpy or even try to dig in. So I'll demonstrate that again. Get the heel first. 1, 2, then you move. 1, 2, 1, 2. What this is doing is putting a continuous line across the edge that, with close observation, I can look at. Now after this, I can pick up the slipstone. There'll be a very small burr that's raised on that edge. Don't have to use a slipstone, though. You can use a V-belt or a buffing wheel with compound, taking away that tiny burr. Or in a lot of instances, you can let the wood turning take it away. Normally I wouldn't have taken that many honing strokes on the stone, but because this is a demonstration I did. 1 or 2 strokes and a few thousandths of an inch is all it's needed, especially on a freshly ground tool. And that has to do with lightness and sensitivity. Whether it's lightness on the stone or lightness on the grindstone, where you just take the balance point of the tool and maybe slightly back, that's all the weight that you need. So I consider sensitivity to be probably the key thing in learning sharpening or in learning wood turning. You become sensitive to your edge, you slow down, you observe the whole movement, the process, you slow down your own movement so you can observe. And with that, getting a sharp edge, and with hand turning, then you'll learn how to turn from there. Now I get to share with you the process of taking a log, this is the bark, looks like a piece of firewood, all the way to a finished product. If you can see this green little twig here, it was just cut a week ago, it's that fresh. This is a piece of apple wood. I've turned a couple of bowls out of this log already, and it's great. I've never turned apple wood before. Not much into cutting down apple trees that don't need to, but this came from a tree surgeon, and it's beautiful. Good shavings, cuts clean. So I'll share with you my thoughts as I'd approach this piece of wood, and then as I'm turning it, instead of putting so much time into techniques, I'll be doing more the way I would in my own shop and just sharing my thoughts as I go. First thing I see here is basically a bowl shape already. You have a rounded shape. Now if I was to cut this out as a bowl, it would have to be this width in the other direction as well. As you can see, it's much too narrow for that. So I'll take this dimension here. Calipers are great for this sort of thing. Then I can run these calipers anywhere around the bowl and get the other dimension that the bowl can be. So I could start here and have a heartwood bowl, but I'd be wasting a lot of sapwood on each side. Then I could turn it the other direction and make this the top of the bowl out here with the bottom of the bowl down here somewhere, or the same thing over here. And that's what interests me more right now. I'd like to show you how I do a bowl that has the natural edge, the bark edge on its top. So I'll look along here and I see it could come from here, come from the middle, take a straight edge. That would show one side of the bowl. And there's a nice one. It's got heartwood in the bottom. And I wouldn't make one here because I'd have little pieces on the sides. And over here's the other possibility. I kind of like that one. That's a pretty straightforward piece of wood being straight grained. And what I have to do if I'm going to cut here is be sure that this side is the same length as this side so it's symmetrical, or it'll have to be cut off later anyway. That looks about right to me. So this is where I'd be bandsawing it. Now after it's sawn, I'll take and mount the faceplate on here. And I haven't used this kind of faceplate yet. This is a 3-screw faceplate. And it'll be roughed out. This again is the bottom of the bowl. And I'll take this little collet chuck here. It's another one I haven't demonstrated for you yet. And then I'll hollow out and turn a green bowl, taking it to a finished product and using water to sand it with this time because it's a green piece of wood. Well, as you can see, I've mounted that faceplate on there now and used drywall screws. They work good, going fast. Maybe it might be hard to see, but I've gouged off part of that bark so it'll sit flat on there. As you can see, I've bandsawed it to a basically symmetrical shape, although it's not really round. Taken off the corners and taking the 4 cuts this way. I don't often take too much trouble in making a piece perfectly symmetrical or round. I think that's what the lathe is for, so I'll make it round now. I like turning this apple wood. This is going to be a fun one.
That sure cuts nice. A lot of greenwood does though, especially your finer grain species. When you touch wood, be sure you do it this way with your thumb back, not forward where it might go down the tool rest. That way I'll be sure all the flats are gone. Right now I'm just going to make the basic shape, get the roughness out of it, and then I'll mount it backwards, or really right side up. Boy, this is nice stuff. Look at that fiddle back in there. Yoo-hoo! As flat as a kid in a mud puddle. This little cut helps to grab the tooth on the collet chuck a little better. I'll go take this faceplate off now. This is that collet chuck, or also known as a spigot chuck, I believe. And you can see here where the faceplate was. Just have to be good and tight. It's a little more delicate chucking system, but it's fast and it holds a narrow foot. That's another handy part about it. Okay. Yeah, there's two totally different ways you can use this gouge. Just basic ways, and then you can change your angles. And then there's other gouges you can use. My idea is just get some gouges and play with them, have fun. Here's using the top of the gouge, using the bottom of the gouge. You just want to use the whole thing. You bought the whole tool. Oh, this is nice stuff. I'm going to stop and check that bark and look at the wood too here for a second. Yeah, these colors just starting to show through. I don't think that bark's going to stay on. I don't want to get hit in the face with it, so here it goes. Smells good. And now you get oh, that's great. Get a whole different effect. And there's not a thing wrong with leaving a bowl that thick. I like this. You get all this shape out here. Then I'll go on and show you a little different technique here. One more cut and then I'll do the outside. starting to take shape a little bit now. I never know what shape I'm going to do until I get into a bowl like that. I'll let it talk to me. Stop it and look at it now. I sure like that knot. It's starting to take form now. I don't want to go too thin on the base of the bowl or it'll chatter when I'm doing the top of it. So I want to make the base thinner. I'll do that later. Now remember how the shear scraper starts low and then works up. Again, this can be a real grabby tool until you understand it, so be sure you start with hand turning and understand its idiosyncrasies. It sure is nice to get a clean cut on wood. This can be done with a scraper too if it's handled very carefully. Let's see how that looks now. Well, I've got the flare shape I want out here. But I don't want to lose that knot, so I'm going to go ahead and change my shape and cut deeper into where that knot is. Take a little more out in here. It looks a little thick in here right now. A little part of that tool needs some sharpening. Won't touch her up. Oh, that's better. I'll look at it again here. I feel like using that shear scraper. That's fun. That's pretty good. I'll stop just about there. You gotta look at the shape sideways. That's where potters have got it made. They're looking at the bowls the right side up. Let's see. It's getting real close. Time for the old shear scraper. Notice that slight chatter. You can get rid of that by taking a higher cut or putting your finger up on top of the bowl, your hand, and bracing it. Taking a lighter cut. So I'm just not worrying about it. Because the bowl is getting thin on the inside. Just about done here. Okay. These things are rubbing me in the face. You want to get to like wood turning, get you some green wood. This is great stuff. Okay, ready for the inside. I'll do the foot later.
Well, you can guess what that pounding noise is. You just hold everything steady. Just be determined you're steadier than that knot is. Yeah, I grabbed because I was talking while I was turning. It's hard to do both. Okay. Well, I could go a lot thinner on this bowl. Anybody could with a gouge, but I like this texture out here in the rim and all. I think I'll leave it about this thick and keep this knot that way. See that? Can you see that slight bit of translucence showing up in there? These little streaks, those are neat. I'm not sure what those are from. That's beautiful. Yeah, I'll keep going. When you hear that sound, that's means the wood's being cut, not just torn off. Sometimes there's other sounds you have to ignore. That hissing sound, that's what you want. That shh. Now I'll stop and feel the thickness. A little bit thicker toward the bottom. I sure like the translucence in wood. It's just because of the water content while it's green. This will lose its translucence when it dries. I like those streaks in there too. That's neat. That's great stuff. That's a good way to tell your wall thickness. You can get accuracy that way just by the color of translucence. Now I'll use that blunter angle tool for down there in the bottom. I could also bring the tool rest in there if it was getting to be chattery or something. Well, that nick you heard is probably a damage to this bowl. It may not be the same one I was hoping it would be. Yeah, there it is. It's warped. These video lights and taking a pause to change angles has warped my bowl. I thought I could get away with a gouge cut on it. That's a lesson about working green wood. It's going to warp on you right now. You got to keep on it. So I'll have to hand sand that and shape it later. I'll take a shear scraper here and see if I can go in and out without the tool rest with it. Probably sanding will be easier. If you get off the tool rest, it'll go in and out with the wood. It's warped. I've always figured that, or heard anyway, that half the craftsman's skill is supposed to be patching his mistakes, so we'll see what we can do with this. It's going to be thin and thick on one side and the other because of the warp there. It's still a precious piece of wood. I've really enjoyed this bowl. I'm not done with it yet. Okay, I've got to get my knife. Yeah, this is fixable. Tough sure car's easy. Carve as easy as it turns. Now it's time to wet sand it. That's a process I use on green wood. Doesn't work on all species of wood. Some woods, like poplar species, don't seem to work at all with the water. Some sand real well. Mostly it's the finer grained woods that seem to work that way. Tighter grained. There's the color back again. I'll try starting with 280, see how that cuts. Gets kind of messy. It's great when it's 110 outside.
What the water does is it keeps the sandpaper from clogging up. You keep it quite wet, not just a little bit damp. I didn't wet this piece originally because it was thick enough. I forgot about time. I didn't think it would warp at all. Now I'll go to the inside. Well, you never know. That's made that bowl run perfectly true now. One thing about this wet sanding that has to be considered is that wet wood, especially, well, like this apple or oak or some maples, they stain very readily with steel. So you see how I've got them here with shavings, keeping the sandpaper off the lathe. The blue stain on my hand is from the acids, the tannic acid in the wood reacting. So even when you're done, you can have little blue spots in the pieces. Haven't quite figured it all out yet. Sometimes it's from metal from sharpening tools, sometimes it's from the sandpaper, it seems to. One thing you want to watch for is that the paper doesn't grab this edge. Like, you hold it like that, you could tear your bowl apart. Something you've got to be constantly aware of. This is 600 grit. This bowl I went 280, 320, 400, and 600. Some woods don't require that fine, and some would require starting with coarser grits. The water content of wood has a great deal to do with how smooth it will cut, as well as the species and the texture. Half-dry wood is probably the worst thing in the world to try to cut.
All right. I think we got us a bowl. You sure want to dry your lathe off when you get done with this process. Okay, it's almost done. Got to do the foot now. Show you a little chuck here in a second. It's been real helpful. It comes off with something that can be a lot of other chucks. It's simply a Morris taper chuck. I take a whole raft of woods and make these two measurements, do the cuts, a little bit of hollow in between, so I just fit 2 points. I just take the measurements off of any Morris taper, whatever taper your spindle happens to be. And then you just leave a stub of wood out here, and you can put any shape you want on the end, even up to big face plates. But it's real quick and sure cheap. You'll see how it's used here in a second. This little piece of sandpaper has a interesting help. I put the grit, believe it or not, against the bowl. So that means that if this piece spins, it'll cause friction against the bowl and spin between the paper and the wood. Otherwise, you're going to burn
the bowl itself. If you recall, I put a little teeny hole right there in the end. So I'll take the tailstock and run it right into that, and then I'll be right on center. Give it a twist, be sure it's okay. Yahoo! I'll bring in a shear scraper that's slightly rounded so it fits into these curves, just to level out the shape so I can see it better. One more cut. Some designs you can work on for the next week and never be done with them. It's discipline you have to learn to just make a decision and go with it. I like the sensitivity that the slow cutting takes in doing delicate details. It's just a personal experience as well as trying to do justice to the wood. I'll pick up my favorite little gouge here. This is that homemade one. I don't know if you remember seeing this one. A double bevel because it's so thick. Might need a hair touch up with a hone. I don't know if I showed you using the little handheld hone. Try to do it more in a sweeping motion rather than in little facets because it's easier to read your edge and you get a pure edge that way. Do it and learn how to feel your edge. Okay. I'll start right. There it goes. Put down just enough to hold the ball on there, and then bring in this oddball little scraper I have that you get in the bottoms of bowls. Little bowl. It's made out of a dentist tool. What it is it's got this undercut motion here, so it can come behind a foot. And there's got this little flat surface to get in, and then the point on the leading edge to nip in. Okay, just like this. Now, let's get the rest closer. You can tilt the tool up a little bit, get more of that shear scraping action. Makes it work more efficiently. I'm going to go in just a little bit farther, and then I'll stop and wet sand the bowl before that tenon gets too tiny. That's about right. What I'm trying to do on the bottom is make a round form that follows the larger form as though it continued underneath and kept going on the other side. Just one more cut here. Okay, now I'll go wet sand it. I think if it wasn't for the water, you'd probably have to start at least a whole other grit or two grits heavier. It just makes it a lot more efficient. As well as this wet and dry sandpaper is a real good paper. Just about done with this guy. There's a rim of mud here. beat sawdust in the air. And a couple more cuts, and take her off. This is the fun part. How far down there can you go? You just finish off the little nub by hand when you're done. The one thing you want to do, it might be too hard to see, but just above the level of the bowl, you make a little nip in the tenon. So it'll break off there instead of break off down into the bowl. Okay, that's it. I guess you could keep cutting and cut it off, but who wants to? Well, you see that piece of sandpaper? Okay, did what I wanted it to. Here's the fun part. Never goes back on the lathe again now. Just a little bit of trim. Okay, that should do it. Wash it off now. Be sure there's not iron on it from my hands. Actually, what I do is I go into my faucet and take soap and water to it. There's a book by a fellow called Eric Sloan. He's written quite a few books called Reverence for Wood. I recommend anybody to read it that likes wood. And it talks about this sort of thing of doing your best with a piece of wood. To deserve the wood and for your own pleasure. Just adds more to your life, I think, to do your best. People do in a lot of different areas that are never acclaimed for it. Whatever wood is, it sure deserves it. Thanks for watching. So far, what I've talked about is the lathe, how I'd make it solid, and I added a clutch to it and talked about that. And of course, about tools, about different grinds, sharpening on them, and different uses for them, different techniques. And about sensitivity, both in use of the tools and in sharpening them. And that was fun going over a green piece of wood and how you take what's virtually firewood and making a finished product out of it. There's just a couple more things I'd like to share with you. If you're a beginner, this is what I think is a good place to start, is a little plate. This is cherry wood. It's out of this scrap piece of wood here that was basically a throwaway to any other woodworking craft. You see it fits right in there. And it was out of waste here because of this crack. You can see that. Fits in back there real nice. I get a kick out of saving wood like this. It was going for firewood. The way I did it was put a faceplate on here. I used a single screw. You could use a multiple screw faceplate on there. And of course it was held like this. First thing you do is excavate this, and a little bit of undercut here. Well, that is for the teeth of the 6-in-1 chuck to grab into tightly. And then, of course, the next thing is to turn the top, and then you're done. If you're an advanced turner, I've got a technique to share with you. It's difficult, but it has its value. I have a fun technique to show you that involves in-grain turning. Sure makes the shavings fly. This is a piece of black birch we cut this morning, and I've turned a tenon on the end. You can see it go in here. Here's a center mark from doing spindle chucking on it, because it is spindle grain. The grain is going longwise with it. Get this down good and tight. There's lots of chucks on the market. I bet we're going to get some good new ones here pretty soon again. That's good and tight. I'm going to turn this just as though it was a stair spindle as far as the cuts that I use on the outside. And again, spindle turning is another subject, but get a taste of it here. And notice how I'm going downhill from the largest diameter to the smallest. That's how it's opposite to bowl turning. You're going with the grain all the time, so it's easy to get a clean cut on the outside. Like that. Well, that's the process I'd use for shaping the outside of an in-grain bowl. Now I'll show you how to do the inside. You notice the height of the tool rest is a hair below center there. Can you see that? There's a reason for that. You don't always put the height the same. When I bring up this tool, then it's on center. That's what I want to do here. Now the first cut is going to be trying to get the center of this bowl out so that I can come from the center out, believe it or not. That's the way in-grain bowls are done. They're backwards to regular flat grain bowls. So here's the process. Up the bevel, bring the edge in, and just like cut out a little cone. There it is. Now I'll cut out another one. This is actually going against the grain, but I'll show you why in a minute. Now what this gouge is, it's out of a round section. It's actually like a spoon bit. It's a drill. Now watch this carefully. Now that I have a cone, I move it in, keep the gouge horizontal. Becomes a drill. Just like that. Here it is again. And that's real helpful in this particular cut. And now comes the fun part. Up the bevel, upside down, move the handle out. Now this gouge doesn't work as good because this blade is short and I'm hitting the tool rest. So I'm going to go for a bigger tool. I'll move the tool rest up just to here. I've never had more fun learning a cut than I have with this one. I call it the Raffin cut, even though it's probably quite an old cut because I first saw a fellow, Richard Raffin, do it. I couldn't believe it when I first saw it. You start sideways, upside down. It's a very efficient way to deal with in-grain. Get the shavings out of the way. Well, now I've got it excavated, I'll stop and show it to you slow. It's a very grabby cut, so this is definitely for advanced learning. Okay, now you can see that the bevel is rubbing and not the edge, and this pivot point is the secret. Here comes the edge, and a hand turn, like this. Now, if I let that bevel come out, in it goes. Okay, it's grabby. Here it is again down inside. Maybe a little hard to see there. Now you move back out, I'll show you the broader movement. Okay, now I twist the gouge and push the handle away from me. It's this motion. I won't spend a lot of time on this cut because in-grain bowls aren't that common, but I wanted you to see it. And be sure you start with a piece of green firewood like this. You're not worried about wasting. Okay, now watch it under power. Enters, gets the cone out. Bevel rubs the whole way. That's a little bouncy from those hand turning things I did. All right, here's a tricky spot. Gotta watch it. Again, this is not a beginner's cut. This is for somebody who's used to a gouge. You can sure blow up pieces learning how to do it. One, roll the tool. Now once you come back and see the whole movement from a longer distance. Well, I'll have to move the tool rest to finish this cut. Okay, when I get up to here, rub the bevel, and then you have to twist the tool over. Rub the bevel, and roll the tool around. Okay. Once more, oh, that's too high for inside now. Sometimes you have to move the tool rest around on these cuts. One, roll, move the handle. All your concentration is not on the edge, it's on the bevel. And it's fun. Okay. Now this is the shear scraper that I've been using on bowls. And it's used like this. Put my hand on the outside to stable it. Mostly you start from the center and come out. It's a shear scraping cut. It doesn't have to be a half round, it could be a full round tool. Actually, you start scraping in the center as you get to the outside, you do shear scraping with it. Okay? You see the whole movement there? It's not tilted like this ever. It's tilted like this. And when you're down in the center, you start out square. Even point a hair down to get to center. You tilt it this way, and then you tilt the handle down as you come out. You're always coming from the center out. And that's how she works. Here's a little bit of hand turning just to show you. That's shear scraping. See that? Never like this. See how that grabs? And like this, you're accomplishing nothing. Start this way and bring up to this angle. You never go in here because it would grab. Start in the center. As soon as you can, you tilt and come out like that. And that's all there is to end grain turning. Now I'll show you shear scraping on the outside. Again, everything will be just the opposite as you would with a normal flat grain bowl. Now here's the tool I use with a normal bowl. Remember this one. But it has to slant the other way, so it would be difficult. Now I'll get an opposite tool for this. That's this one. Now this can do hollows, but this hollow is too steep, so I'll start about here. Now normally when pieces are turned with this kind of grain, they're not scraped, they're done with a skew chisel or a gouge. But when you get into difficult grain, which this piece doesn't normally naturally represent, shear scraping can be a real advantage. You see I'm getting into trouble on the end over here. The handle's running out of room. So I'll grab a tool that's real similar but moves the handle in a different place. See that? And it's a square nose. Get this stuff out of here. See, it's the same slant. See if I can get over there, but the handle's not running into the headstock. Here it is slower. Okay, I'd never use it like this. It'd be slammed in. Like this, it's scraping. It's halfway in between. It's shearing and scraping. Well, that's it for shear scraping on the outside. Now to help clarify the subject of grain direction in bowls, I have a couple models that I made. This first one is a bowl, sort of a serpentine shape or S shape. These little steps are exaggerated grain going this direction. So normal bowls, the grain goes like this, except that a wood turner sees a bowl in this fashion. And here's a little homemade tool to help out. You'd never go like this toward the step, especially to get a clean cut, because you're hitting an end grain. You start from here, hit the side of the grain first and come out. Now when you get to this flat spot up here, you can go either direction because you're going 90 degrees to the grain. Now I've shown this compound shape because often it's thought you go from the foot to the rim, but actually you go from the smallest to the largest diameter. So from here you start and go up. Now on the inside of a bowl, everything's the opposite of the outside, so you'd start from here and go down. But if I started from the rim and went, I'd be butting into end grain here. So you need to get in, and maybe with just a round nose or shear scraper, you come back out this way to be going with the grain. Now just as the outside is opposite to the inside motions, an in-grain bowl is opposite to a side or flat grain bowl, and this represents it. Now the grain is coming from the bottom out towards you. That might mean the heart's in the center or the heart's on the side, but the grain is linear in this way. So if I, like on a regular bowl, if I started here and went toward the top, I'd be butting into the end grain. So it's in this fashion. And you'll read about that in wood turning books, and as they talk about spindle turning, it's the same thing. Remember, I drilled the hole in the center of the piece. That's so you can get down in here and either be cutting toward side grain or with that super cut, be coming out this way. That is a difficult cut. Don't expect to learn it the first time. I hope video will make it a little easier than it was the first time I saw it. It was at a wood turning conference. I really recommend going to turning conferences and workshops because you get 5 or 10 instructors, different opinions, and you put it together and learn more about turning as well as new things. I learn new things all the time at conferences. I also really encourage working with firewood, especially green, new stuff like this. You don't have to be goosey about it. When you're done, or if it broke the piece, or if you didn't, you can put it back together with its shavings and haven't lost anything. Put it in the fireplace. Well, on the other hand, you might get something you like out of a piece of firewood. This is a little ash limb I found in a firewood pile the other day. I took it to a little translucent bowl. That's kind of fun once in a while to play with that. There's another little piece of scrap firewood I got to play with here the other day. It's a piece of mulberry firewood. You notice the sapwood up here at the top. And there in the center is that oval pattern you get out of putting the heart at the bottom of a piece. It was out of just a piece of firewood, a limb actually. You notice this serpentine shape here. That's the same thing that I was using for the mock-up, that pattern for in-grain direction. This other piece is quite a different form, more of an oriental shape, and while this one's more classical. And that leads me to an important discussion I'd like to go into now about forms, designs, and where you come up with them. That's what all these sketches are about here. It's fun to just take a piece of paper and just start drawing your favorite shapes on it. Probably the hardest thing to do is get symmetrical, draw the whole bowl. So that's where a mirror comes in real handy. In fact, I got this mirror for free from the glass shop. It was in their trash can. So you can see this shape is a little bit like that oriental shape I was just showing you, the ash bowl. And the one down here below is more of an Indian shape, like this Southwest Indian pottery. But you see, if you pivot the mirror, you can go from a vase kind of a form out to more of a bowl kind of form, just that quick. And then if you go in and out, you can change the proportion within the same shape. Up here at the top is another form. You can see that, there's my thumb in your way. But this is that, a little bit like that serpentine shape, and here's the same idea. We're coming up to become more of a vase. Now here's a vase more like they do in glasswork sometimes. You can pivot back on out and open up into a bowl. Then if I had a straight line, I could come out and become more of a plate or a platter. And down here below is my favorite one that came up on this drawing. This starts out as sort of a vase shape, and then it widens out. You see there's a bowl, kind of a V-shaped bowl. I keep widening out and moving the bottom a bit, and there's a platter or a plate until it goes down and it touches the ground on the other side there. So that's one way to discover forms and come up with new forms. Let's just imagine that this was your piece of wood to turn. I've marked it already here where the bark would come off, and this wane from this side, we know that it'd have to come off. And then the center where a mirror would go. So here's this idea. So I'd take this silhouette, and if I wanted a lot of ideas for the bowl, I'd draw it on a piece of paper, maybe 20 or 30 of them, and then start drawing shapes and use the mirror. Yesterday morning as I was walking out in the woods here, I love these hardwood woods around here. They're beautiful. The light was coming down through the leaves and making them translucent. And if you notice, I like translucents. But the shapes in the leaves and on the ground was beautiful. The oak leaves and the birches and maples. And that's a good place to start. Put a mirror next to them if you want to. You can go to a pottery store and get a book on pottery, even glass. A lot of these shapes are transferable over to wood turning. So what I suggest is that You go out in the woods and you get you some pretty wood, even firewood, and look at some pretty shapes and discover.
The thing that drives me on in this articles and teaching, research, doing this video is a real strong feeling that there's a misunderstanding about turning. But what I'm trying to provide is to make it reachable, and to make any type of wood turning reachable and okay, respectable, honorable, important. To me, it's every bit as important that a person make a $10 hand-turned small salad bowl as it is a $3,000 collector's urn. They're both on the same level of importance to me, because if they're done with sincerity and with effort, with skill, with human expression, with love, with creativity, with honoring the material, they're identical, because they provide for the person who owns them a connection to things natural, a connection to human creativity and care. There's a fairly small amount of real humanness in the things around us. And so that's why I want to make it reachable, to draw it all together and to help relieve any feeling that some of it is more dignified or more important than another part of it. I'll never forget being in a turning conference, and the question was asked to the panel. It was a panel discussion. The students could ask any question they wanted. And this person was real direct. They said, "What makes you people so special? That you're up there in front and we're out here on this side, and yet we both love wood turning." Wow. I sat back on that one. I wasn't on the panel. That's a real important question. And I think it's just a matter of not so much being born with a skill. I haven't seen that. It's a passion, it's a love, it's a commitment that comes out of being overwhelmingly involved with something. And whenever I've seen that in a person, whenever I've seen intense desire, drive, involvement, I see accomplishment. And those people have something to teach.
If you've enjoyed this tape, you'll want to know about our other fine woodworking books and videos on wood turning. Here's expert instruction on the basic techniques of the lathe. In turning wood, Richard Raffin has written a guide to the fundamentals of center work, face work, and finishing. The book is also a valuable reference on lathes and accessory equipment, tool selection and sharpening, measuring, and safety. For inspiration, there's also a 16-page photo gallery of Raffin's turnings. The companion video brings the book to life. Raffin demonstrates the nuances of tool grip, stance, and body movement through a series of gouge and skew exercises. He then shows you how to put these skills to use through a range of projects, including a tool handle and a wooden box. Best of all, when you buy this 2-hour-long video with its book, you save $9.95. In his newest companion book and video, Turning Projects, Richard Raffin presents 23 turning projects ranging from simple to complex. The book provides design variations on each. Wood turning is best understood when seen on video. By watching Raffin at the lathe, you'll see how to manipulate skews, gouges, and parting tools to produce the entire repertoire of wood turning cuts. Raffin also shows you how to sand and apply finishes and waxes, and he offers important safety tips along the way. The set allows you to experiment with the unlimited range of forms the lathe is capable of. This book is the first in-depth examination of bowl design from a master turner. Raffin relates the classical elements of design, such as color, form, proportion, and scale, to to the problems facing anyone who crafts wood into turn bowls. 6 pages of templates help you get started, and master woodturners of the world show some of their most interesting work in a 15-page color photo gallery. Raffin's turn bowl design deserves to be in every woodturner's library. If you're a home builder or woodworker, there are dozens more helpful books and video workshops published for you by the Taunton Press. To get your free catalogs, just call 1-800-888-8286.